The night is on my mind. The sun will still shine, but the night is on my mind. So parlay while I drop this rhyme. See, Jake be getting illy when the sun get dark. He be coming out the heads, but you don't let me start. There's activities aplenty in the nighttime.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to my guest. This is Okorie Johnson.
Hello, hello. How you doing? Good to see you.
Kanoom, Stic.man, Ibomu. And this is interSessions. Thank you.
All right, all right.
So the way this works is it's literally a conversation. We'll have a discussion here talking about black masculinity and manhood, rites of passage, and all this different forms. But we'll be approaching these topics from the perspectives of fine arts and hip hop culture and how these different worlds intersect. And intersect in ways that people don't typically expect them to. So I think that's really kind of the thrust of intersections. This is about revealing a perspective of art, of hip hop, that most people have not imagined before. So with that said, I'll kind of kick it off, and I wanted to tell a story about an experience that I had as a young man that in many ways kind of shaped my movement at a very pivotal point. So I'm 18 years old. I just, my summer job just ended. I was working at a grocery store, like bagging groceries and stuff in this town in South Carolina. And I had a week and a half before it was time for me to go away to college. And one of my uncles came to me one day, he was like, yo, do you want to come work with me, on my job? He worked for the city, like repairing sidewalks and potholes and stuff like that. And this was an uncle of mine who, for a great part of my childhood, spent time in jail and, just in all kind of, knucklehead stuff. But anyway, he invited me to come to work with him, and he told me I could make like $20 an hour, which was astronomical to me. I wanted that. I want $20 an hour, right? So, I agreed to go to work with him. So the day I'm supposed to start, he wakes me up about 5:30. It's time to get ready. I'm like, man, it's early, Unc. You know what I'm saying? He's like, we got to get out there and get this money. So 6 o'clock, the truck pulls up, you pick us up. It's already like 95 degrees outside. It's dumb hot. And we get to our first site, and there's a sidewalk that's cracked. And the foreman tells us, we're going to report the sidewalk. So they hand me a sledgehammer, and they tell me to break up the concrete so we can clean it out and re-pour the cement. So y'all see me now. I'm skinny. 22 years ago, or whatever, I was really skinny, right? And I never had a sledgehammer in my hands before, so I'm excited. I'm about to go to work. So they give me the sledgehammer, and I start hitting. Bow! With everything I got. Bow! I'm trying to destroy the earth with this sledgehammer because I'm having fun with this thing. And my uncle's like, yo, slow down, man. It's gonna be a long day. I'm like, I got it, Unc, I got it. Bow! Hitting it. Bow! And then I felt my ears pop. And then everything just started slowly going black. And I couldn't see anything, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, Unc, I can't see. And somebody's like, he's having a heat stroke, get him some water. So they take me to the side of the road, and they sit me down, they give me some water, pour some water on my head. And slowly, my vision and stuff starts to come back. And the foreman walks by, he sees me sitting there on the curb, and he's like, send him home. So they send me home. I'm back in the house by 7 a.m.
Wow.
So that evening my uncle comes back, he hands me $100. He's like, my boss told me to give you this, but he also told me to tell you not to come back. And my uncle, I'm ashamed and everything, but my uncle's like, I took you out there for a reason. He's like, I knew you weren't going to be able to handle that. I knew you weren't cut out for that. You are the kind of person who belongs somewhere with your feet under a desk in an air-conditioned room. He was like, but me, I ruined my life. I messed up in my life. This is the only option I have. So when you go off to college and you start thinking about goofing off or whatever, remember this is what you have to look forward to, And that lesson, that stayed with me. I mean, there was really a point in college where I nearly flunked out of college because I was wilding out. And when they told me, when the administrator told me that if I did not pull my grades up, I would be kicked out of school, the first thing that flashed in my mind was that sledgehammer.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if yeah, exactly. But, I'm wondering if you guys have a similar kind of experience or story, where you had, someone who kind of imparted a lesson to you in a way that maybe an unconventional way, but something that was had a big impact, a profound impact on you and on your development.
Well, I have a story when I was much younger. I don't know that I have any really memorable stories from when I was 18, 19, really about to be a man. But when I was 13 or 14, I was a small kid. I was thin, but you also notice I'm shorter than you too. So, and I went to an all-boys school, and there were just a lot of big people around, a lot of big athletes, and I was kind of athletic, but I played the cello, and it was, I was always fighting. I was always kind of finding somebody to kind of pick on, and usually the bigger the better, because that communicated to them that I wasn't afraid and all that kind of stuff like that. And it must have been like, 7th or 8th grade, and we were out on the lacrosse field, and I probably messed with some big dude that I shouldn't have messed with, and my coach pulled me over after practice, and he said, "Okorie, I get it, you're strong or you're athletic and you want the big guys to know that. But one day you're going to pick on the wrong big dude and they're going to squash you. And it's always better to be suspected of being able to take care of yourself than prove that you can't." And that was a really big message for me. And I guess it kind of stayed with me. But the only one that comes to mind at that kind of rite of passage age is my uncle took me to a strip club when I was 18 and 19 years old, and he took me to a strip club with some of his friends, and I don't know that there were any words of wisdom. I think it was just, here's $1, and come on back and sit down and talk with us, So those are the two that jump to mind, at least immediately. My uncle's probably mortified that I told that story too, right?
So, I think that, one of the things that we were talking about backstage is, especially with the strip club story, is this notion of there being a kind of fraternity of manhood that, is at some points imposed, on you, whether you are looking for it or not. It's like, you're a man, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, and how we kind of bump up against, those kinds of things. Because, as I was telling you earlier as well, as a young boy, I wasn't very athletic at all, but I was kind of, chastised by, older men in my family for not playing sports. I would much rather be drawing or, hanging out with my sister and her friends, because she has some cute friends, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be rolling around on the ground with them dudes in the football, you know what I'm saying? So, you have these kinds of, impositions, of masculinity that get thrust upon you. So you have...
Yeah, I relate, man. I relate. I had a lot of strong examples, Like I still got into my dumb shit, But I had the conscious side, and the street side. And, I was learning from my cousins, my older cousins, and, they was robbery experts and hustling when the hustling first came, and my older brother, and they would talk about being a G, and that, and a G, this is how you operate with your fashion. This is how you operate with women. This is how you operate with your money. This is how you keep your respect, all these things. And at the same time, I would be around the college campus, around like the black student unions and the black psychologists, and I had mentors, that was elders, that was conscious and selling things on the street and incense and books. And so that part of my upbringing was like, they would also though, like Babatunde Imhotep, one of my good friends, mentor, he would also be talking about being a G, right? But G as in you a God, and And, you know, so I would get them jewels, and then I would get the street jewels, and I'll be confused as hell. You know what I mean? But, you know, to this day, you know, I still apply lessons from getting in trouble and going to jail. But the honor, the courage, and at certain moments that I had to prove to myself, you know what I mean? And I learned how to let go of some of that identity too, you know what I mean? And, you know, so I think as men, we go through that, you know what I mean? We go through street credentials, you know what I mean? As well as who we were before the mainstream, you know, of, you know, go to school, get a degree and all that, but who was we before that? You know, our heritage, you know what I mean? So I think finding the balance has been what my life has been about, is, you know, don't lose the edge, you know, but don't cut yourself.
Right. And you know, and this is to both of you guys as well, but just really thinking about that negotiation of types of manhood, right? So you have this kind of street, you know, and particularly types of black manhood, I should say. You have this kind of street identity that's supposed to be like, you know, authentic blackness, but then you also have this kind of like, you know, more socially acceptable, I guess I could say, you know, kind of, you know, let's say Theo Huxtable versus, you know,
Hold up.
yeah,
Hold up.
right. You know, and,
Right.
and you're kind of like put in a position where, you know, often you have to kind of decide one or the other. You know, like what you know, have you had experiences like that, and how were you able to navigate that or negotiate those spaces?
I mean, I would say most of my life was pretty much bouncing back and forth between each pole. I lived in Washington, D.C., and Northeast D.C. up until about I was 13. And in the 80s, D.C. was ravaged with crack, and so it was pretty serious on the streets. And I went to a prep school in Bethesda, so I had to get on the bus and travel up to Bethesda, but I had to go through my neighborhood to get there. And so there was a way that I kind of had to carry myself when I was in my neighborhood before I got up to Bethesda. And then there was a way that I had to comport myself while I was there in Bethesda, and then on my way back home. You know, there was a different thing. I mean, I remember being on the train, and you guys see this instrument over here, so, you know, half the time I'm walking with the cello, which just does not really situate me as...
It don't read thug.
It doesn't read thug. It doesn't read... It was, I mean, there were definitely some moments. I remember being on the metro in D.C. and had my cello with me, and just to really paint the picture so you guys can start to laugh, I had to wear a coat and tie, and so, you know, end of the school, ties down here, coats on, but I'm riding in Northeast D.C., and there's this dude at the other end of the train, and he just kind of catches my eye, and I'm like, I don't think I know him, so I'm trying to meet his eye contact, so I'm not looking away, but also not engage him too much. So, you know, I'm doing this kind of like, you know, I mean, you know. And one moment, you know, one courageous moment, like our eyes lock, and then he looks up at me and he makes the shape of a gun with his hand and he kind of points it at me. And he fires like that. And I might have peed my pants at that point. Like I just didn't really know how to deal with that at the moment. But I also knew I couldn't completely cower, right? Like that was a really important thing that I kind of learned, that, you know, you can be scared, but you can't really walk around and show that. Right. So again, I'm doing one of these like, kind of like looking behind, you know, he was definitely pointing at me, so I look away for a little bit. And then I catch his eye again, and he is deliberate about catching my eye, and then reaches his hand out and kind of does this and fires. And I'm kind of like, okay. And then I get off at the next stop, which is like 6 stops away from where I was, but I'm kind of watching to make sure that he doesn't follow me. And I got off, and, you know, I survived, and I tell the story. And it's not that I had this particularly like tough, aggressive posture, but I feel like having to negotiate the city in the 80s gave me a certain awareness of my environment, and at least a skill set for figuring out how you're going to handle certain situations. And I think that was one of the things where, I mean, I'm not so sure that my daughters, I guess girls don't necessarily have the same experiences, or maybe they do, but I'm thinking about that right now, because I'm not creating those kinds of learning experiences for my daughters, because I'm very much sheltering them and protecting them from a lot of things. And I'm not really sure how they would respond to that kind of really in-your-face threat. Yeah.
I think for me and for my sons also, like learning the martial arts at a certain point gave me a way to direct certain energy and make it make sense as a mature person.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Certain things that, we was doing, robbing a pizza man and, getting in fights with people because because you looked at me funny or, stuff like that. It's like once I started practicing the arts, the humility just comes. Because a lot of times you in the street and situations ain't fully, they don't come to, full blown. You know what I mean? It be looks and it be threats and whatever. So dudes have all kind of personalities, you know what I mean? But in real situations, like when you're training, you come close to, as close as you can come to real life situations that hurt. You're dealing with pain. You're dealing with, it don't matter who you think you are. This person's skill will put you in the hospital or vice versa. You know what I mean? So it kind of humbles that energy, but without taking it out of you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we feel like we have to choose between warrior and punk.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And martial arts is a way where you understand it's a time and a season for different things. And you want to train, you want to walk hard, you want to be strong and capable, but you want to be humble with it because anybody could get it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you
get this work.
You know what I mean? And also that you have a responsibility to kind of avoid confrontations unless it's absolutely necessary. And then, so I think for my son, that was why I wanted to introduce him to the arts, because I didn't want to be teaching him the dumb shit how I learned certain things and making him feel like he had to can't back down from situations. It's like you be use strategy, but have the skill.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because without the skill, there's no confidence, and when there's no confidence, you either kill somebody because you're scared to death,
Trying to overcompensate.
right? Or you let yourself be oppressed in situations that make you later have low self-esteem. So it's about that balance,
I don't want to give it all away because I know you haven't read it yet, but it kind of segues into this. But I recently finished reading Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and one of the things that he describes in great detail and very poetic language is, the lack of actual physical bodily agency that a lot of black people experience particularly in his neighborhood in Baltimore, where to your point, you're kind of overcompensating for lack of control of your own body, because all these other forces can at any moment take your body away from you. You know what I mean? And so your way of coping with that is to take somebody else's body, to take somebody else's power. So he calls it the dragon that animates people's bodies, you know what I'm saying? So that, you got, guys going around trying to find the weakest person, that they can find, or somebody step on your shoe and that, being caused to just go off and like try to destroy somebody. But, and I'm wondering, because you talked about teaching your son martial arts, but what happens for those young men who don't have that, that kind of guidance, you know what I mean? And, like how then do we give them that kind of confidence? How do we begin to teach them or impart for them, that they can have some control and agency, that they can make some decisions about the ways in which that they interact with other people, that it doesn't have to just be like two dogs barking at each other as loud as possible because everybody's afraid, of getting bit.
Yeah, man. We got a responsibility community-wise, not besides just our families. We just buried a great mentor and teacher, Baba Jim Cameron, who Talk about warrior, man. Like, you know, this brother was Army Ranger. You know, he was principal, professor, you know, all these things, and he left that community and became a homeschool teacher for African boys in his basement. You know what I mean? And he had been doing that for, you know, over a decade. My son went to his school since he was 3. You know what I mean? And he offered all those skills and camping. My son learned to camp at 3, you know, and he probably camped like 100 times. You know what I mean? And carrying his own tent for 7 miles, and you know, all those lessons of really the traditional kind of rights of growing up in traditional settings, in nature, with your age set. You know what I mean? Learning responsibilities, learning leadership, learning how to follow, being responsible. You know, and he just recently passed, man, and. You know, that was a big blow to the community, because, you know, he dedicated himself to the kids who might not have that in their household. Right. You know what I mean? And so, but I think that's definitely part of the solution is mentorship. You know what I mean? When we say, you can't say mentorship without men. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I think back to being a child, and there were lots of men in my life who, I didn't grow up with my father, and but there were lots of men in my life who could kind of pick up the slack from time to time. So, you know, just some strange examples. I had a cousin who got all the boys in my family, and this is going to sound strange, but to all the boys in my family play ice hockey. And like, we weren't wealthy, we didn't necessarily live out in the suburbs or anything like that, but we were an African-American family in Washington, D.C., Northeast, and 5 of us played ice hockey, and he was the one that knew how to play ice hockey. So he taught all of us how to play, he got all of our parents to kind of take us out to the rink, and it was a strange thing. You know, we didn't really talk about it to people who didn't skate, but it was kind of like you mentioned, a quiet skill that gave you a certain kind of confidence. I remember, you know, there was another man in my life who was a professor at Howard University, and I think I first witnessed someone love music in his house. Like, there was this one album that he would play all the time. It was Angela Bofield's, I think it was from the album Angie, and it was Under the Moon and Over the Sky. And it has like an altering time, and like every time I came over to his house, he would put that album on, and I would just see him kind of retreat into his own mind, and I don't know, I thought that was cool. That was something that I wanted to embody. And he wasn't my father, he wasn't related to me, but without even really, I think, trying, he modeled not just kind of like a meditation, but like an appreciation for something that I think stays with me to this day. So, I mean, to your point, to mentoring is huge. I think I'm still getting to that point right now. Right now, it's about as far out as I have friends that I consider brothers, and they all have sons, and so I'm kind of Uncle O to their sons, and kind of do that kind of close mentoring. But you bring up a really good point that we do have a responsibility to the community beyond just kind of our immediate family.
And it's like it happens without us even realizing it when it's natural. Yeah. Like a friend of our family, I call him Uncle Bo. You know, this was like in early 80s. He used to come and get me, and we lived in Wakulla County, Tallahassee, Florida, dirt roads, redneck woods, you know, and basically he would walk from a couple miles to my house and be like, "You coming with me today?" And like, "You hanging with Uncle Bo." So I'm like, great, somebody's showing me attention. You know what I mean? You know, we're gonna spend some time, and we would walk them miles. I wasn't thinking like, this is long. I'm just with Uncle Bo. And what he taught me was old school survival and hunting. You know what I mean? So we would be hunting like birds, squirrels, and you know, at the time it was just fun because I'm hanging with, you know, Uncle Bo. But what he would do, it was, as I study now, like principles in rites of passages. He would do things like we would shoot the birds, but we would, you know, cook the bird. You know, we would shoot the squirrel, but we would eat the squirrel. You know what I mean? And he would, every part, you know, we boil it, the fur fall off, you know, you bust it open like a chicken, you know what I mean? And he was teaching me this, you know what I mean? So, and then on top of that, I would keep the tail of everyone I shot and put it on my hat. Wow. So I was super country with it, right? But those little things, like, you know, as I started studying about what they call the stages and the seasons of manhood, I realized those was classical lessons. You know what I mean? That was just happening. You know, there's so many brothers as we talking that I want to honor. You know, for lessons. People who introduced me to Malcolm X and this brother Dave he was at FAMU, but he took the time. He was just a student at FAMU. He took the time to create a fraternity for us, with basically the locals who ain't had no business on campus. He was like, I'm gonna get y'all, put y'all on Malcolm X, da, da, da. We had a little name for the fraternity, and he hazed us, you know what I mean, with books, and, you know, thumping us in the chest when we don't know the answer and all this. And you know what I'm saying, just random people caring, you know, so. Yeah.
And I mean, I think, you know, ultimately, like, that's at the heart of it is like caring, you know what I mean? Like love. And I think, you know, that's one of the really challenging things I think about expressions of black masculinity is it's often couched in a language that does not include love, right? So it's like, you know, showing love, showing affection, you know, between men is like a taboo, you know, but how do you impart wisdom? How do you teach? Even if you're teaching somebody how to hunt, like there's love in that. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a need. Like, you know, love is at the seed in that. You know what I'm saying? Like so many things can grow from that. But again, you know, a kind of question to you guys: expressions of love and black masculinity.
Yeah, I think what's especially hard for black men is expressions of love between peers. I think if you're lucky, you can find an older man who will say, you know what, you could be my son, you could be my grandson, you could be my nephew, and I'm going to teach you something about the world. But, you know, I remember when I was with my cousins, like the way that we played was we pretty much beat on each other. I mean, that was, you know, we were down in the basement, and, you know, everybody else was upstairs, and basically we would just go at it. And then whoever had to go upstairs lost. Like if you had to go upstairs and tell somebody, which meant you might have had a broken appendage, you know, like but you still lost. You know what I mean? That was something. And I think there's definitely some value to that because you know you learn the limits of you know what you could do and what you could take. But I think also some of that was, yeah, man, you cool. Like you know, we like you. And the way we're going to show you that we like you is we're going to thump on you today. Right. And you should feel part of the community. So, you know, I know it sounds a little, but that's how we do it. Vividly. And I remember feeling really endeared to those guys. Like, I felt like they would take care of me if something happened. You know what I mean? But I also felt like, you know, we were having a family gathering and like literally like it was this kind of stuff. If I was sitting